Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nazir, daf Nun Tet. Today's daf is sponsored by Ruchi Summer in honor of Meryl Sasnovitz. Happy gold plus silver birthday to Mama Safti and Safti Rabba Extraordinaire. Today's daf is sponsored by Elisheva Gray. With much gratitude and appreciation to Rabbanit Michelle, Rabbanit Leah Sarna, and Maggie Sandler for the two wonderful supplementary courses these last few weeks. It was all wonderful learning, each course in its own way. And if the Stam is the connector of the Talmud, Maggie is the great Hadran connector, bringing all of the threads and all of us together from doing so much behind the scenes. Toda rabah to you all and Chodesh Tov. I will second that thank you to Maggie. Okay, we are now going to get started with our daf. We're going to go back. It's much not as complicated a daf as yesterday, although there is a bit complicated down the road here. We'll see. But we're now going to review our topic that we started yesterday of men, can they shave under their armpits and their pubic hairs? So Rav had said, Mekel Adam Kol Gufo B'Tah. Mekel basically means to lighten something. What it means is to lighten the hair growth. If he wants to, he's allowed to do that anywhere in his body. And then it said with a razor. And then the Gemara raised a contradiction. It said, doesn't it say in a Braita? If you take off hairs from your armpits or your pubic hair, you're going to get lashes. So how could possibly Rav say it's fine to do this? To which they distinguish between razor and scissors. Scissors is okay because that's not, we didn't see this inside yet, but it seems to be, it's a problem because that's the way women remove their hair. And therefore, if it's with scissors, that's not the way women remove their hair. If it's with a razor, yes, we had a bit of a problem because Rav actually said you could do it with a razor. We said, oh, he didn't really mean a razor. He meant something like a razor. Okay. Then we had the first statement of Rav Chiya bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua. I say the first statement because I'm going to show you now on the chart. We're going to have two different versions of this statement of Rabbi Yehoshua. So we have Rav Chiya bar Abba says in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua, "Hama'avir beit hashech beit ha'erva lokeh." One gets lashes for doing this, which matched what we saw in the Braita before. But then we said meitive, but wait, this contradicts. This contradicts a Tannaitic source over here that says that removing hair is only rabbinic. So how could you possibly get lashes? And to which we saw the answer was, when Rav Chiya bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, you get lashes, he meant on a rabbinic level. This isn't really a Torah prohibition. However, the second version of Rabbi Yochanan is very different. That's starting from the top of our daf. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Hama'avir beit hashechi ubeit ha'erva loket mishum lo yobash gever simlat isha. Now, according to this, you can't say it's rabbinic. And here we get into this pasuk, this very famous pasuk. A man cannot wear a dress of a woman. And what we mean by this is not just in terms of clothing, but in terms of actions. Removing armpit hair and pubic hair is basically considered this Torah prohibition. So now we really have a problem. And the Braita, according to this version, is going to say, but isn't it just rabbinic? To which they answer, Hu de'amar ki haytana. He holds by a different Tana. Okay, and we even saw already that there was a Tana that holds Hama'avir beit hashechi ubeit ha'erva. I'm looking at the sheet, right, at the top of the beginning of the sugya in yesterday's daf that we just reviewed. It said in the Braita, if you do this, haresa lokeh, and that could match Rabbi Yochanan, who says that it's by Torah law. But theoretically, you could explain lokeh as rabbinic. So we'd rather find a better Tannaitic source that really connects it with the verse and then shows that it's a Torah prohibition. So now it says, Ditanya, here's the Braita. Hama'avir beit hashechi ubeit ha'erva, harei ze over bishum lo yobash gever simlat isha. So there you have it. Here's a Braita that says explicitly what Rabbi Yochanan said. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan was basically saying what appears in a Tannaitic source, and don't start questioning him from some other Tannaitic source because there's two different opinions here. One opinion is it's only rabbinic to remove hair, and the other says it's Torah law. From here, we're going to say Tanakama, Hai lo yabash gever my darish. So now we want to understand. Now they call him Tanakama. It's not exactly Tanakama. Tanakama usually means the first Tana in Mishnah where we have a machloket between two people, and the second one comes with a name and the first one doesn't. In this case, we're talking about two different Braitas. Neither actually had a name associated with it, but we're going to say the one who said it was only rabbinic So how are they going to understand this pasuk of lo yabash gever simlat isha? So for this, I made a chart that we now have, right? Tanakama, who holds it's only midivrei soflim, and we're going to bring a braita where he darshans what lo yabash gever simlat isha applies to, and then we're going to see a second opinion in that braita, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, which is going to be more in line with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan that removing hair and other such things is part of the Torah prohibition. So here are the two opinions. Very, very interesting sorts, and we'll give a little bit of historical context to it in a few minutes. So lo yekli gever alisha, my Talmud lamam. So here's a braita. Okay, I skipped a few words. Mibayle l'chidetanya. So what does Tanakama here do with the words who says, again, Tanakama who says removing hair is only rabbinic for a man, right? What does he do with the pasuk lo yabash gever simlat isha? A man shouldn't wear a woman's clothing. Well, l'chidetanya. Lo yekli gever alisha, my Talmud lomar. What do we do with this pasuk? Im shelo yabash, and the reason why they're asking is because they're going to say, if you want to say this, that can't possibly be. If you're going to say shelo yabash ish simlat isha, isha simlat ish, okay, the simple reading is, right, a man should not wear a dress, and a woman should not wear man's clothing. Here it gets a little tricky because, right, does that mean pants? But pants, there's women's pants, right? There's unisex pants, right? There's all, what exactly that means, it's a big question. But this source doesn't even think that that's a problem. Why not? Because the pasuk says, okay, here's the entire verse. Lo yekli gever alisha, v'lo yubash gever simlat isha. So a kli gever shouldn't be on a woman, right? Man's clothing shouldn't be on a woman. Women's clothing shouldn't be on men. Ki toavata shamelokecha kol se'ela. Because this is despicable. Now, when does the Torah use the word toeva? Usually when it has to do with some sort of inappropriate behavior, more like in a sexual sense. Now, wearing the other's clothes does not really do that. And he says it explicitly here, ve'ein kan toeva. This is not toeva to just wear clothing of the opposite sex. Ela shelo yobash ish simlat isha v'yeshev ben hanashim. What we're worried about is very interesting. You would think if you're going to engage in, I don't know, prostitution or something, you wouldn't actually go wear men's clothes and hang out with men in order to do that. You would probably more wear women's clothes, right? But what they're saying here is that the issue seems to be something that either directly is prostitution or it will cause it, or if the word is prostitution, but what we call in Hebrew znut, will end up creating a strong relationship between males and females. That will, right? It doesn't say those words, but it's obvious because they're talking about toeva. That will lead to some sexual impropriety. And that's what we're concerned with. Okay, we're not concerned with just somebody walking around wearing clothes of the opposite sex. That's not going to do anything. But if that causes them to be in the company of the opposite sex to the extent that it will cause some sexual impropriety, that's what we're concerned about. Okay, that's the issue. Now, you might be thinking, still, that doesn't, that's what's going to cause, And what you have to understand, and we'll see, there's even a proof for this further on in the Gemara. Okay, this is something that I'll quote B'Shem Omra, which is Ani Schiffmiller, who when I used to teach in my house in the last cycle, she would come and she's a tour guide, and she was reading a book about the Roman history. I've mentioned this before, and she said how when in the middle of her reading, she saw that all these things we talk about, bestiality and other things, and all these kind of things were really very prevalent in the Roman society and also in the Greek society. And that what they're discussing here was not just some theory, like it sounds weird to us, but in those days, it seems, and you'll see this proof for it in the Gemara in a few minutes, that this is what many men in their society did. They removed their armpit hair and their pubic hair, and it was part of this whole sexual impropriety going on in their culture. And it was indicative of this culture for them, basically, and this culture that Judaism was trying to go against. And that to us, it sounds very strange because it just, right, nowadays, most men don't shave their armpits, and whether they did or didn't, it doesn't really seem to us that this would connect. But when you understand it in terms of what was going on in their society, what they were trying to do was to go against social norms that were going on in the society around, which was all steeped in sexual impropriety. And their whole goal was to kind of remove the Jews from that kind of environment. So understanding it there makes a lot more sense. So now, and again, this is the rabbis, because it's how they're defining the Torah law, right? It's not the Torah. The Torah says it, right? Again, the Torah also says toeva. The assumption is this is causing sexual impropriety, and the rabbis are defining it in what happens in their day. So now, what do they say? So here again, let's just remember where we're up to, because I got you distracted a little bit. We had these two approaches, right? That we saw Rabbi Yochanan, who says it's all Torah law, and that was based on one braita. We saw this other braita that it's rabbinic law. Now, if it's Torah law, it clearly comes from this verse. But now the rabbis, the opinion, the braita that said the Tanakh, it's not only rabbinic. So how does he understand this verse? So he understands this verse as if you've gone way farther with it, right? That you're doing something that creates a situation where you'll be involved in sexual impropriety. That's the issue of the Torah law. If you're not either close to engaging or maybe actually engaging, it's not 100% clear from the braita, then you haven't gone against the Torah prohibition. Now, it still might be, again, they said it's still rabbinic. Okay, it's not like it's permitted entirely. It's still rabbinic, according to this opinion, meaning it's forbidden by rabbinic law. Now they say, right, so again, all right, so Shaloyabash that, okay, Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. Now we get to the other opinion. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov, minayin shelo tetzei isha b'chlei zayin l'milchama. Very, very interesting, relevant topic nowadays. How do you know that a woman shouldn't go out with weapons to war? Okay, depending on where you live, it might not be so relevant, but me living in Israel with kids who go to the army, it's very relevant, and it's all around us, that women are carrying guns. Well, according to Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov, that is a Torah prohibition. Women can't go out with weapons. Talmud lomar, lo yeh kli gever al isha. What is kli gever if not? Kelim doesn't, right? Kelim can mean clothing. It could also mean weapons, right? We have the nosei kelim all the time in the Tanakh, right? They're the ones carrying the weapons. And in fact, the Mefarish here proves it from Yael, who actually wasn't even Jewish, but Yael, Eshet Chever Akeni, who kills Sisera, how does she kill him? With a peg. Remember? They say, why'd she kill him with a peg? Not because it happened in her house and she didn't have a weapon in her house, which is probably the reason. But he says, here's a good proof. Women don't use regular male weapons. They use some alternative. Okay, so first of all, it shows women do fight, but they shouldn't use weapons, okay, that men use. And then, lo yubash gever simlat isha, shelo yitaken ish b'tikunei isha. And what does that mean? That a man shouldn't fix himself up the way a woman does, whether it means jewelry, whether it means makeup, whether it means hair removal, right? And then that would be Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov's approach, that it's all included there. Okay. Issue of women and weapons is a fascinating issue. I want to just refer you to Rabbanit Yafi Clymer's Shiur, and on second thought on Hadran's website, with a whole article about a whole shiur on the different sources about women being able to, first of all, the sources say even women should go out to war. So if they go out to war, it seems they're going to need weapons, right? They're not going to take pegs with them. It's not going to really help them very much. And how they dealt with it in the state of Israel, when the state of Israel was created and women were enlisting, how they grappled with it and the different ways they came up with, some people think it's forbidden, which is why they, one of the reasons why they discourage women from going to the army, whereas others think it's permitted, and on what basis. So I'll send you there to get further details. Also, I put a link there that Rabbanit Yafi mentioned in her article, this very well-known article of Beit Hillel, which is a group of male and female Rabbanim, Rabbaniot, that female and male leaders that put together an article about women drafting into the army and why it's okay to support that. So I put the link there to the article that you mentioned on this page, on the page on our site, so that if you want to read it, it's in Hebrew. Unfortunately, it's not translated as far as I know, but you could try Google Translate, maybe it'll help. Okay, now, so we have these two approaches. Is kli gever and kli isha, and that is not wearing clothes of the opposite sex, is that only when it leads to licentious behavior that's forbidden? Or does it mean clothing, weapons, actions, all sorts of other things on the other side? Okay, next. Amar Rav Nachman, bin Nazir mutar. So Rav Nachman says, if you're a Nazir, now it's unclear. When I say unclear, what I mean is debate among the commentaries how to read this. I'll go with one approach, which is to say we're talking about when the Nazir shaves. Remember, the Metzora, the leper, shaves all the hair on their body. The Nazir only shaves the hair on his or her head. So now what they're saying is if you have a male Nazir and he's shaving the hair on his head at the end of his nezirut, while he's doing that, is it okay if he shaves, let's say he decides he's going to also shave the hair on his body and he shaves his armpit hair and his pubic hair? Is that permitted? So Rav Nachman says it's permitted in the context of the shaving of the Nazir's hair, which is interesting. And that's why there's a bit of a debate. Is that really what he's talking about? Maybe he's talking about something else. But we actually don't hold that way. Okay, since men shouldn't be shaving their hair there, even the Nazir, when he does the shaving of his head, he shouldn't shave the hair there. Obviously, if he's a leper, yes, because lepers shave all the hair on their body. Here's a very interesting situation. So if you remember, we started our sugya with Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said you cannot remove hair in your armpits and your beit ha'erva, right, your private parts. So now comes the rabbis and they say to Rabbi Shimon bar Abba, we noticed Rabbi Yochanan doesn't have armpit hair. Okay, whether it was talking about in his private parts, I don't know, maybe the son of the bathhouse, but armpit hair is definitely could be noticeable. That, we've noticed he doesn't have hair there. How could that be, right? Now, this is a classic hypocrisy, right? He told us it's usher by Torah law, and he himself removed his hair. So what do they say? Amar lahon, he says to them, and this is, number one, it's a lesson for leaders. Be careful to do what you say, but it's also a lesson to the community. Don't start pointing fingers when you don't really understand anything. He says, as you get older, your hairs fall out. So he's older, his hairs fell out. He doesn't have hairs because they fell out, not because he removed. Don't start pointing fingers when there's no reason to be pointing fingers. A lesson to be learned, as I said, on both sides. Now, as I mentioned to you before, that you can even see in the sugya that this was very prevalent in those times, that men were doing this, and presumably the men who were doing this hair removal, were in the category that the rabbis did not approve of, right? They were involved in things the rabbis didn't really like. So we're going to see that from this story. There was a guy who was liable for lashes. He was getting punished by lashes. Now, when they would give lashes, they would take off their clothes, and then they would start whipping them. So very unpleasant to think about. We'll get into more details of that at some point, more graphic details. Right now, we don't need to get into all the graphic details, but they're going to give lashes in front of Rabbi Ami. So since they took his clothes off, they saw his armpits. And they noticed that he had hair under his armpits. You would say, right, again, I see people writing in the chat about all sorts of people who do hair removal, but the majority of men don't, right? It would be pretty typical. It wouldn't kind of, send any signals about, oh, this must be something. But there, it signaled something to them. The fact that he hadn't shaved his armpits, they said, Amar lahom Rabbi Ami shivkua. Rabbi Ami said, stop giving him lashes. Okay, it's unclear whether they had started already, and maybe he got a little bit of the lashes, or maybe just, right now, let's finish, and then I'll talk about those options. Den min chavrayev. This is someone who's part of the chaverim. You might remember this term, we've seen it before. There's amei aretz, which are people who don't keep a whole number of halachot. There's certain halachot that they're more, more typical that amei aretz don't keep, but in general, they weren't viewed by the rabbis as being very careful about halachot. And then there's chaverim. Chaverim are the in-group, according to the rabbis, right? These are either the Torah scholars, but they don't have to be Torah scholars. They're just people who are careful about purity and impurity issues, and they're careful about other kinds of issues. And the fact that this guy is not shaved his armpits shows us, and that's what's fascinating about this, he's clearly in the group of chaverim, because now you learn that at least in this time and in this place and in this whatever, in Rabbi Ami's world, most people who were not chaverim, who were amei haaretz, were shaving their armpits, and that was part of the culture that they were against. So now what's interesting is he says, if he's part of us, part of this chaverim, you don't need to give him lashes. Now that's a big weird thing. What if you're liable lashes? You get lashes no matter who you are. So the commentaries all have things to say about this. Either it was only rabbinic, and then once they saw that he was part of them, they realized maybe he doesn't need to be rebuked so much for this. Some people say even for someone who's a chaver and cares about halacha, well, what's the purpose of lashes? To teach you a lesson. Well, once he was humiliated by removing his clothes, or perhaps they had already given him 1 or 2 lashes, that was enough for him to basically repent. They thought, oh, if he's a chaver, that should be sufficient. So it's not like he didn't get punished. It's that the punishment was just less. He doesn't need that much punishment in order to repent. All different possibilities about why, but it's a little bit strange that just because someone's a chaver, they shouldn't need to get punished for whatever it was they did. They obviously did something wrong. But the other interesting part, as I said, is that this made such an impression on them because it's clear that the prevalent custom was not to be like this and was yes to shave, which they were again against. Okay, so that's our story there. Next question. We have a few small questions. We'll finish this side of the page, which is topic number 1, and then we're going to move on to the next mission. So now they asked, it seems like they're asking, can you shave your armpits and your private parts? So Amarle Asu says, no, you cannot. Amarle, Vahakagadil, but they said, but it's going to get long and it's going to be uncomfortable. And what if you really want to get rid of it? Amarle Barpachte. Barpachte means like you lowly people. Zman Yeshlum. Posman Shu Gadel Noshel. Time passes, and when time passes, the hairs fall out. Don't worry, they'll never really get too long, right? They're not going to get to the floor if you don't touch them, so don't worry about it. Can you rub up against something to make the hairs come out, right? So maybe you can't shave, and maybe you can't even use misparayim, even though we kind of suggested maybe you could, but it seems like not. But can you rub up against something to cause the hairs to fall out, like kind of an indirect? Amarle says, no, you can't do this. Big domahu. So then they ask, what about if you do it with your clothes on, where like already it's less likely it's going to come off? Amarle mutal, that you could do. But ikeda amre, some people say this last question about the clothing had nothing to do with our topic. It was about a totally different topic. It has to do with armpits, let's say, but you're not supposed to touch areas like your armpits or other private parts of your body when you're davening. It's not appropriate. Maybe it's dirty because of the sweat. We don't want you to be doing that. But what if your clothing is there? And let's say you have an itch there, right? Can you touch that area while your clothes are on? And that was the question he asked about the clothing, not about rubbing it to remove hair. Amarle asul. He said it's forbidden. But we don't actually hold that way. You can actually scratch your armpit while you're davening with clothes on. Okay, so quick review of what we did for now. We won't go back at the end of the daf because we're touching on a totally new topic now. But we have this debate about how to understand not wearing clothes of the opposite sex. Is it something more major that's really leading to sexual impropriety, or is it something more minor that is just not acting in a way that's typical for women, in a way that's typical for men, whether it's jewelry, whether it's hair removal, whether it's weapons for women, and the like. Okay, so 2 different approaches, and whether this hair removal is by Torah law or by rabbinic law, right? That was all connected. And then we saw a few side questions off of that. Now we're getting back to our case in the Mishnah. You might not remember anymore because we got very distracted, but our Mishnah at the beginning of the chapter, he talked about 2 nezirim. One is tameh and the other one is not, right? One became impure to a dead body, but we don't know which one, right? Some third person saw them, said, oh, one of you is tameh, I don't know which one. So we had a whole thing, how they bring these 3 sacrifices together, right? All together, 2 of Tahara, 1 of Tum'ah, in a separation of 30 days between the first set of 2 and then what? And they all make these stipulations and we have a good resolution. But what if, starting with our Mishnah, this is just the continuation of that, Meit echad mehem. Okay, so top of Amud Bet, new Mishnah, what if one of them dies before you bring any sacrifices? So now we're stuck because it was very easy when you had 2 people and you brought the sacrifices between the 2 of you. Between the 2 of you, you needed 3 sets. So great, you got 3 sets and you kind of said it's either mine or yours, etc. But if one of them is dead, you can no longer do that. So Amar Rabbi Yehoshua comes up with a bit of a crazy explanation. And Ben Zoma is going to say, you're nuts. This is not a realistic explanation. It's not realistic to expect that you could actually get this done. Yivakesh echad min hashuk. Go find a friend in the shuk, okay? Go find someone. Sheyadu kenegdo b'nazir. That will agree to be a Nazir with you for 60 days. Okay, go find someone who's willing to do that, right? Just to help you out with your quandary. Now, maybe you have a really good friend who is willing to do it, but most people are going to have trouble finding this. But comes Rabbi Yehoshua to say, let's do this. So this is what you do now. Okay, and I'm going to pull up the chart. So he basically says on the second side of the study guide, okay, Rabbi Yehoshua says this is what you do. Omer, you say the following. Im tameh hayiti, if I, okay, this is me. I'm the one who's now in doubt. I was with another Nazir. and that person died. One of us was impure. We don't know which one. And now I picked another friend to be a Nazir with me. And I say the following. After 30 days, or no, right now I'm at the beginning. Sorry. Right now I'm at the beginning. I said, Im tameh hayiti, if I am impure, then hare ata nazir miyag. Then you're a Nazir immediately. So if I'm impure, then I'm going to finish my impurity in 30 days because I have to wait 30 days because maybe I'm really a Nazir. I can't cut my hair or anything or bring the sacrifices. But if I'm tameh, then you become a Nazir with me immediately. And then at the end of 30 days, right, we're going to bring a korban tuma and a korban tahara, right, to the both. The problem is it's not as simple as that because maybe I'm not liable in the sacrifices of a tameh. So im tahor hayiti, if I was pure, harei ata nazir achar 30 yom. But then I say the following. Okay, sorry, I jumped a little bit. But first, we're going to just say what I say at the beginning. The first part, I actually didn't put this on the chart. But first I say, either I'm impure and then you come and be a Nazir with me right now. If not, you're going to be a Nazir in 30 days. Now, what that really means is you're a Nazir for 60 days, just because, right, you're a Nazir no matter what, out of debt. But you're really only going to be a Nazir for either the first 30 or the second 30. It's just all that time, since maybe you're a Nazir then, maybe you're a Nazir then, you can't drink wine, you can't become impure to dead people, you can't cut your hair, etc. So now what do? Sofrim shloshim. So we count the first 30 days. Umivi'im korban tuma'ah v'korban tahara. When we're done with the first 30 days, we bring 2 sets of sacrifices. Now, before we go on, I want to show you what sacrifices are brought. So for this, I made a little chart at the bottom. Tiglachat tum'ah. So if you're impure, you bring 2 birds, one for a sin offering and one for a burnt offering, and you bring an asham. Okay, now, right now, I'm bringing this tiglachat tum'ah out of doubt. I don't know if I'm really liable. So when Rabbi Yehoshua says I bring a tiglachat tumah, I actually don't bring the asham. There's no way I bring the asham because the asham can never come voluntarily. If you remember, we learned a special law that there's a unique halacha by a bird sin offering. The sin offering usually can't come misapek. A bird sin offering can be brought from a doubt. So presumably what Rabbi Yehoshua means is the sin offering of the bird. Some people think that he includes also the burnt offering of a bird. And why is that? Because the burnt offering of a bird could theoretically be brought voluntarily, okay? But other people say, if you remember, we had this sugya where we said that the burnt offering of the bird, the ola offering that you bring for the tumah, is only a doron ba'alma. It's like an extra gift. But the real main thing is the chatat. So that's why some people understand Rabbi Yehoshua as meaning you just bring the chatat, the minimal, right? The minimum required, but it's also the most important. And it's the one that can be brought in a case of doubt. So even though he just says very simply, korban tum'ah, what he really means is either just the chatat or maybe the ola with a stipulation that it could be voluntary. But remember, chatat and asham don't come voluntarily. That's why you can't bring a sin offering or a guilt offering and say, I'm going to volunteering. You only bring that if you're liable, if you're obligated to bring it. But like I said, there's a unique exception, which we learned before, about the chatat, the chatat of the bird, that you could actually bring a chatat bird offering out of doubt. So that's what you do here. And you bring a set of the korban tahara. Okay, korban tahara, you're going to bring the whole thing down. Why are you going to bring, the kivsa for a chatat, the keves for the olah, and the ayah l'shlami. Now, why are you allowed to bring a whole set? Because remember, either it's mine or it's, let's say you're my friend that I brought along, it's yours. Okay, so that's how we're going to say v'omer, and he stipulates the following: Im ani atameh. So I said, if I'm the one who was impure and the friend who died was not the one who was impure, korban tumah sheli. So this chatat that I brought now, and perhaps the ola, depending on what you hold, is mine. V'korban tahara sheli shalcha, and the pure, right, the set of 3 that we brought of Nazir of purity, that's yours. Notice it doesn't talk about shaving here. We talked about the shaving. How the shaving is a problem, because you're not really allowed to shave because you shave your peyot off. So that seems to be why the shaving isn't mentioned. Ve'im aniu hatahol, but if I'm the one who's pure, right, then they would only do the shaving at the end, right, at the end of the 60 days where they're definitely nezirim at that point. If I'm the one who is tahor, then what? Then I'm not obligated to bring the korban tum'ah. And then what did I say before? If I'm tahor, you're only going to be a nezir in 30 days. So meaning now we're at day 30, your nezirut is going to start today, and I'm finishing my nezirut. So korban tahara sheli, right? So the set of 3 that I brought for the korban of finishing nezirut, that's mine right now. And korban tumah b'safek, and the korban tumah I brought me safek, and I can bring it, but it doesn't really do anything. And then sofrim 30 yom, we count another 30 days. At this point, I'm still a Nazir because maybe, right? I don't know if I'm supposed to be a Nazir or not. And you are possibly a Nazir also, depending on whether I was impure or pure. And then mivi'im korban tahara. At the end of this set of another 30 days, we just bring one set of of the Nazir's finishing his nezirut or her nezirut, ve'omer. And then I would say the following. If I was the one who was impure, then again, just like the previous Mishnah, we go back and say what happened then. It's a good review. Korban tumah sheli, if I was impure, then the first set we brought a korban tumah and a korban tahara. So the impure one was mine, and the korban tahara was yours. And then if that was the option, you're not a Nazir anymore. And this one that we're bringing now, the one that we're bringing at the end of the second set of 30 days, korban taharati, that's mine. But if I was the one who was pure, then again, what happened? Korban tahara sheli. So the first set of korban tahara was mine. You weren't even a Nazir those first 30 days. The korban tumah was brought me safek, right? Which was allowed, but it was basically useless. And zeu korban taharatcha, and the set that we're bringing now, the korban tahara, that's yours. Okay, so it's a little long-winded, but it makes perfect sense, and it fits in exactly kind of the way we saw the Mishnah yesterday. This is basically substituting someone else for the other person, but it's a little more complicated because we have a korban tumah out of doubt, and that's why we're only going to bring either the chatat or maybe the ola with a stipulation that otherwise it'll be a voluntary one. And we don't bring the asham, right? We can't do it exactly the right way, and we have to find someone in the shuk. To which, like I said, Amarlo Ben Zoma, how on earth are you going to find somebody who's willing to be a Nazir with you? No way, no how. It's a ridiculous solution. Ella, so he says, I'm going to give you a different solution. Mevi chatata of ve'olat behema. Now I want you to see this in the chart. Okay, we're going to bring at the first 30 days 2 things. Okay, one is a bird, the chatata of, which goes for your tiglacha tumah. Remember, we learned that that's the one you can bring out of doubt. And you bring an animal for an ola. Now, don't get confused. If you were tameh, you bring a bird for an ola. If you're tahol and you're finishing your nezirut, you bring an animal, okay, a keves from the sheep family for an ola. So now, okay, a male sheep. So now this is what you do. You bring one from the tumah, okay, the chatarot, and one, this ola that's an animal for the tahara. And you say the following, v'omer. Let's go back up to the chart. Im tameh hayiti, if I was impure, ha-chatat mechovati. So if I was impure, I was the one between the two of them that was impure. So the chatat is now, right now, after 30 days, I'm bringing my sacrifice. What about the ola? Oh, well, I told you already, an ola can be nidava. So ha'ola nidava. Okay, so the ola, I just brought a voluntary burnt offering. I'm allowed to do that anytime I want. Ve'im tahor hayiti. If I was pure, ha'ola michovati. Okay, so now what happens? I brought this animal offering for the tahara, but, right, and the chatat misafek, which I'm allowed to do. But what's the problem? I'm supposed to bring an ola, a chatat, and a shlamim. So what do? So fail 30 yom, umevi korban tahara. So what do? I wait 30 days, and then I bring the chatat, the kivsa lechatat, and the ayah l'shlamim. Okay, I bring the female sheep for the sin offering, and I bring the ram for the peace offering. And I say, im tameh hayiti, if I was tameh the first time, and I bring an ola. Again, I bring an ola also, I forgot. I bring a complete set of these 3. Okay, it's hard for me to highlight these, but I'll bring, right, the shlamim, the ola, and the chata. So I basically ended up bringing a bird sin offering the first time and a sheep burnt offering. That was all the first time, which was, one of those was good, and one of them was either nedava or misafek, right, voluntary, or it was misafek and useless. And the second time I bring a complete set of tiglacha tahara. And how does that work? Well, I say the following. Omer im tameh hayiti. This is, by the way, proof that Mishnayot aren't always so simple. Im tameh hayiti, ha'ola rishona nedava v'zo chova. If I was impure, then my first ola, again, what's good is they always go back. My first ola was just a voluntary offering, and my chatat was taking care of my responsibility. And zo chova, this ola I'm bringing now, because you bring the same ola, right? Two months in a row. So the first one was just voluntary, and this one was for my obligation. And now I have my set of 3, perfect. But if I was never impure in the first place, and then my chatat was just brought me safek, but it's irrelevant, my sin offering the first time. The ola harishona, when I brought that animal that was the burnt offering, I brought it for my obligation. And then zoni dava, the ola that I'm bringing now is just a voluntary one. So again, what's going to happen? When the first 30 days were over, I brought one of my sacrifices for tiglach hatara. We're going to now have this split of 30 days between my whole set. Because if I really wasn't impure, then my first sacrifice, I gave the ola for my completion of nezirut. But 30 days later, I brought the sin offering and I brought the shlamim, the peace offering. And the ola that I brought along with them, that's just a voluntary one because I don't need it anymore, right? Vizo shar korbani, and the other 2 animals I brought are completing my nezirut of tahara that I started 30 days ago, and now I'm completing. So Amar Rabbi Yehoshua says to him, Nimtza ze mevi korbanotav l'chatzain. How could you split your bringing of the korbanot? You brought after 30 days your ola, and your chatat and your shlamim 30 days later. That's just weird, he says. Okay, and that doesn't make any sense. But despite that, hodulo chachamim leBen Zoma. But in the end, the rabbis concede to Ben Zoma, meaning that Rabbi Yehoshua ends up agreeing with Ben Zoma. So even though he goes against him in the Mishnah and says, I don't understand how you can create this split of 30 days in between your 3 sacrifices you're supposed to bring together, in the end, it seems he agrees with Ben Zoma. So let's just review, because that was a little bit complicated, or a lot complicated. We started with, right, these 2 nezirim, and we had this whole process of how they bring. And then we said, well, what if one of them, right, our Mishnah started after that Mishnah ends, what if one of them dies? If one of them dies, Rabbi Yehoshua's idea is bring someone from the shuk, and then you can bring your sacrifices again. Everyone really seems to say the only one you can bring the safek of the tumah one is the sin offering. Perhaps the burnt offering with this, right, that maybe it'll be a voluntary, but nobody really seems to, it's not clear whether we say that. Let's just ignore that for right now. He says basically bring your sin offering for the tameh and bring a set of tahara, and it's either my tahara or it's your tahara. And then after another 30 days, bring another set of tahara, and that will be either mine or yours, depending on which way it went. Whichever one didn't bring it last time is now bringing for the completion, and we're good to go. And we just brought that one chatat as in case I was impure. But basically, Ben Zoma says you're never going to find anybody who's going to be a Nazir with you for 60 days. And therefore, right, remember, it's not just being a Nazir and all the prohibitions, you also have to pay for sacrifices. It's just not going to happen. And therefore, he suggests you can bring, right, he says, bring a chatat for the tumah and an ola for the tahara, and stipulate either this is good, and then my other one is just a voluntary offering, or that one was brought for safek, and my burnt offering really counted, and then it will combine with the ones I'm going to bring at the end, right? And then he has to say the one at the end, when he brings the set of 3, either it's his complete tahara, because 30 days ago he was impure, or it's partial tahara, and the other one from the tahara was brought before, and we're going to combine them, to which Rabbi Yehoshua says, how can you combine 2, right? How can you leave 30 days in between? That's very weird. So, right, it's basically splitting your korbanot in half, not exactly in half, 1/3 and 2/3, but that's the idea. But in the end, somehow Rabbi Yehoshua concedes to Ben Zoma and agrees that that's a better solution. So the Gemara, here again, we're back to some lines that have a bunch of different ways of interpreting. The Gemara asks a question on Rabbi Yeshua's end question about splitting the sacrifices and bringing one the first 30 days and then 2 in the last 30 days. Vilete, so what? So he'll bring them split. What's the difference? As long as he brings them, whoever said they have to be brought all together. Obviously, in an ideal world, we'll bring them all together, but obviously in this situation, we're stuck. So what? So you split it. It should be fine. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, lo amar Rabbi Yehoshua el l'chadei b'at talmidim. He didn't really mean it when he said it. He only said it. It's not true. It's not really a problem. He only said it to see if the students were sharp enough to know that that's not an issue. And he wanted to challenge them. Some people say he was saying something else to challenge them. Anyway, we'll go with this interpretation. that he basically, again, like I said, there's just many interpretations of both this line and the next one, but he dropped that line, and that's why in the end he conceded to Ben Zoma, because he really didn't have any problem with it. He just threw that in to see what the reaction would be and if his students were really sharp enough. This, by the way, leads to a whole halachic discussion about whether you can lie in class as a teacher to kind of trip up your students and see how sharp they are and see if they'll catch things. So there's a whole question about it. Is lying permitted for that circumstance? Okay, next. Amar Rav Nachman. This line is much more difficult to understand. Ma'ili avele Rabbi Yehoshua lidake delo lisru. When Rabbi Yehoshua, okay, so it's a little bit confusing, but what did Rabbi Yehoshua, what's he going to say about the rotting of, if we're going to split, okay, there's this thing about shnufa, you have to wave it, and then because you're going to have to wave it, there's this, just 1 second, there's this issue, right? What's he going to do for the korban shlamim that it won't rot? If both have to, it's a little bit unclear what he means, but he's concerned with the shlamim meat rotting. If we wait, if we have two people bringing sacrifices, it's unclear exactly what this is. The best interpretation I saw was to change dake. Dake are like the insides, that they won't get ruined. But some people, this Rav Azriel changes the girsa to rake. Rake is rok, is saliva. And what they're saying is, what is Rabbi Yehoshua doing to saliva so that it won't rot? Meaning, okay, it's like a bit of a derogatory statement about Rabbi Yehoshua. He had to get the words out, meaning he took these words out of his mouth that really weren't true. He was just trying to take them out of his mouth to get rid of saliva. Okay, in other words, he was talking just to kind of get things out of his mouth, but it didn't really mean anything. It's like another, and then it's connected to the previous statement saying, he didn't really mean what he said. He was just trying to speak. Okay, anyway, that's a tough line to understand. Now we move on to the next Mishnah, and this, at least at the end of our daf, it's a review of something we saw, although it is a bit complicated. Again, I brought up the charts that we used last time when we learned this Mishnah. I told you we get to this at the end of Nun Tet Amud. We saw it on Daf Nun Vav. We have a case. Nazir shayat tameh b'safek u'muchlaf b'safek. He perhaps was impure and perhaps was a leper, but we're not sure. So what does he do? He can eat sacrificial meat only after 60 days, only after he does the 2 shavings of the leper. And he can only drink wine and become impure to dead people, meaning he only finishes nezirut after 120 days. Why? This was all yesterday's stuff. If you're a leper, you're allowed to shave, even though you're a Nazir. That was what we said. Aseh overrides, right? The positive commandment of Mitzvah overrides the positive and the negative of the Nazir, but only bisman shu vadai, only if you're a definite Mitzvah. But bisman shu safek, but in our case, it doesn't override. Eino doche. So therefore, since, okay, and this is the last chart on the page, since every 30-day period of these 120 days, it's possible that you're in your stage of nezirut, of tahara, right? You're your actual Nazir now. Because if you became impure, you have to push off your nezirut to the second 30 days. If you were a mitzorah, you'd have to push it up 2 periods of 30 days. Because again, all these people who are possibly impure, possibly mitzorah, can't shave unless it's definite, and it's not definite, so they have to wait till if maybe you're a Nazir, which is, let's say, option 1 is maybe you're a Nazir tahor, and you weren't a leper, and you weren't impure, well then, maybe these 30 days you can't shave because of that. So you have to wait till the end of the 30-day period. Okay, because maybe you weren't a leper, and then maybe you were a Nazir, and therefore only after 30 days are you allowed to shave. Then maybe you were a Nazir who became impure. So maybe your actual nezirut is taking place from day 30 to 60. So day 30 to 60, no one can shave. So that's why if you're a mitzorah, let's say, and you shave, right, the way we ask it. So you first shave in case you're a leper after 30 days, but you can't do your second shaving of a leper, which should be 7 days later, because maybe you're in this period of being a Nazir. Because maybe it's option 2, right? This one. So then what about the next 30 days between 60 and 90? Well, if you're actually a leper, then again, you're going to wait 30 to shave for the first leper. You're going to wait 30 to shave for the second leper. And then your actual nezirut would be working right now. So then if you're a Nazir, again, you can't shave those next 30 days. So therefore, again, if you had all those things, what you end up going to do is your first shaving will be mitzorah, your second shaving will be the second of mitzorah, each one with a 30-day interval. And then and that's why you can already eat sacrificial meat because you're finished with the leper. And then you have the tomb of the Nazir and the Tara of the Nazir, and that's also with 30-day intervals. And after 120 days, you're not a Nazir anymore. Okay, that's that case. We're going to go more in detail into that case in tomorrow's daf. Wishing everybody Chodesh Tov and a great day.